Hi, welcome to my presentation, Tailwind, the future of CSS is here. My name is Amadou Sall. I am a Google developer expert in Angular. I am from Senegal, but I am based in France, where I work for Air France. Like many of you, I have a love-hate relationship with CSS. I used to hate CSS a lot, but now I am really in love with it. I think CSS to be one of the greatest technologies that exist. But to be honest, I haven't written a single line of CSS for a while. But all my applications are beautiful, responsive, maintainable, and fast. Is it magic? No, I just use Tailwind CSS. And I will show you how you can do that too. But before that, let's talk a little bit about how we do CSS today. Basically, there are two main options. You either use vanilla CSS or you use a component-oriented CSS framework like Bootstrap, Foundation, or Materialize. In the vanilla CSS approach, you write everything from scratch. For example, if you want to style a button, you will start by adding a class myButton to your button element in the HTML. Then you open your CSS file and add a bunch of declarations like padding, border width, and border color. You also need to take into account pseudo-states like the active state, the hover state, and the focus state. Then you have your button. This approach gives you a lot of freedom. You have all the power of CSS at your disposal to build any design you want. But it is also a lot of work because you are starting from scratch and you are on your own. This approach also involves a lot of risk. It doesn't scale very well and usually the code is unmaintainable. The second option is to use prebuilt components from a component-oriented CSS framework. If we are using Bootstrap, for example, to style our button, we will add a class btn for anything related to the layout of the button, and we will add another class btn primary for anything related to the color of our button. And then we have our button. What are the benefits of this approach? With this approach, you move very fast. You have a lot of components at your disposal, which makes you productive. It is also very easy. You don't need to be good at CSS. You just have to use CSS classes provided by your framework. These frameworks are very good in terms of quality. The developers behind them really know CSS. They will make sure to take into account all edge cases. The main downside of this approach is UI monotony. All websites built using these frameworks look the same. If you want to customize this framework, you will end up building your own CSS framework because these component-oriented CSS frameworks are very rigid. What if you could build custom designs without the downsides of vanilla CSS? What if you could build custom designs without losing your mind? I have a solution for you, and it is called Tailwind CSS. Unlike other CSS frameworks like Bootstrap, Tailwind doesn't give you predefined component classes like buttons, card, or alerts. Instead, Tailwind gives you low-level CSS utility classes that you can combine to create your own user interfaces. My goal today is to help you understand the value proposition of the utility first philosophy. But before that, a little disclaimer. The things you will see in this presentation may seem like a terrible idea at first, but please be open-minded and be ready to discard all the ideas. Let me also warn you about something. Tailwind is addictive. Once you start using Tailwind, you will not want to use anything else. Enough talking. Let's see Tailwind in action. Okay, let's see how we can build a button with Tailwind. I will start by adding the button element to my HTML. Let's say my button. Next, we can start adding some Tailwind utility classes. Let's say I want my button to be blue, so I add the class bg blue 500. I also want the text to be white, so I can add the class text white. Okay, what do we have here? So we have a button that doesn't look like a button, so maybe we can add some padding. Let's do that. So to add horizontal padding, we can use classes like px4. We can also add some vertical padding by using the class py3. Now we have something that looks like a button. Maybe because we are cool, we can add some rounded corners. So to do that, we can use Tailwind utilities, rounded LG, rounded 2XL, 3XL. Let's use 3XL. And now we have a rounded button. Okay, what about pseudo states? In Tailwind, if I want to add some style, when the element is on a certain pseudo state, I can add the name of the pseudo state. Let's say hover and then colon and the name of the utility. So here I want my background to be pink when I hover over this button. So I will say hover colon bg pink 500. So if I do that and I come here, you can see that if I hover over this button, the pink background is here. Now let's build something more complicated like a block layout. We'll start with the header, the navigation. Okay, so I will add here the header element. Inside here we can add heading 1 saying ng-conf, and we can add also a nav element for our navigation. And we add a bunch of links to this navigation. Okay, let me just duplicate this HTML here. Okay, like you can see, we have raw HTML. Let's style this. Okay, because I like the color blue, I will add a bg blue again. I will add some horizontal padding px4 and vertical padding py3. Okay, the text also can be white. Let's do text white. Okay, so we have our background and our padding. Let's style this heading 1 element. So I will say class, I will say text, maybe we can go for text 2XL here, and font bold, so that our heading 1 is really visible. Okay, looking good. Maybe we can add some spacing between our heading 1 and our menu. So here I can come here and add some margin on this element, let's say MT4, and for each menu item I will add a class MT2 to add some margin between them. So we have something that is looking good on mobile, but on bigger sizes, well, it is not responsive. The cool thing about Tailwind is that all the utility classes have their responsive variants. Let's say I want to make my header a flex container on medium-sized devices, so I will add a class mdflex. Also, let's center everything, so I will do mdcat colon items center. I want on more bigger screen sizes to have my heading 1 on the left and my navigation menu on the right. So let me just add a flex utility justify between. Okay, cool. We have now our heading 1 on the left and our menu on the right. But the menu on desktop, maybe we can use a horizontal menu. So to do that, I will first remove this MT4 on medium-sized devices. So I will say MD MT0. I will do the same here for our links. I will say, okay, on medium-sized devices, MT0, 0, and then on medium size, maybe margin left 2. Okay, what do we have? Okay, so here I forgot to make my element a flex container so that items are stacked not vertically but horizontally. So I will say MD flex. Okay, so we have built a responsive menu with Tailwind CSS without too much effort. Okay, now we can create some card for our blog post. So let's say div here. Okay, so here I can add heading 2 for the title. Let's say my blog title. We can add a paragraph with some text. Let's say, okay, let's add some lorem ipsum. And maybe in the end we can add a link. A link here saying learn more. Okay, let's try to style this. Okay, so here we can come and add a white background by saying bg white. We can also add some padding. I always use the same values, px4 and py2, and I will add some shadow to my block card to make them pop a little bit. Let's do shadow 2xl. Okay, so we have something. Let me wrap everything inside another div so that we can add some padding here. I will say, okay, let's do p8. Okay, so we have our block element. Okay, let me duplicate this code so we can have 3 of them. Okay. Well, on mobile, what I want to have this design but with some spacing between the element. And on larger screen, I want 3 columns. So how do we do that with Tailwind? So we can use the grid utility classes. So here I come and I say, okay, I want my container to be a grid container. On mobile, I want 1 column. So I will say grid calls 1. And I want some spacing, some vertical spacing and some horizontal spacing between all the cards. So I will say gap 6. Okay, so we have our design looking good on mobile, but on desktop, like I said, we want 3 columns. So very simple to do with Tailwind. We add, let's say LG, and we say we want 3 columns for our grid, and we have our design. So on mobile, we have 1 column with 3 cards, and we can have another design on desktop. Now that we have seen Tailwind in action, let's talk about its benefits. Tailwind is the first CSS framework that comes with a true design system out of the box. Instead of using arbitrary values in your CSS, like padding 11 pixels, you have a predefined set of values that you can choose from for your spacing, your typography, your colors, and so on. With Tailwind, you are never deviating from your design system. This will ensure that you have consistency across your pages, but also across your applications. With Tailwind, you get responsive layouts for free. All the utility classes have their responsive variants. If you want a utility class to only apply at a certain breakpoint, just prefix it with the name of the breakpoint plus colon. This makes building responsive web applications a total breeze. No need to write major queries anymore. Tailwind is extensible. You can configure Tailwind with plugins to avoid having to define everything manually. A great example of this is the official Tailwind Typography plugin that helps you style content coming from a CMS with ease. Another benefit of Tailwind is its smaller bundle size. In production, your bundle is usually between 5 and 10 kilobytes. This is because under the hood, Tailwind uses a tool called Purge CSS. This tool will remove all the unused utility classes from your main bundle. And smaller bundle size means faster application. And faster applications mean that your applications are usable even in locations where high-speed internet connection is not available. Overall, I think that Tailwind provides you with a greater developer experience. What does the Tailwind developer experience looks like? Most of the time, when working with Tailwind, you don't need to write CSS. Everything happens inside your HTML. No context switching. You can also avoid naming things. And naming things being one of the most difficult programming tasks, I think this is a big win. Tailwind allows you to rapidly prototype. You can experiment directly in the browser without going back and forth between your browser and the IDE. You can also refactor with confidence. When you delete some HTML, you don't need to worry about deleting the associated CSS because there is no CSS involved here. In a typical project, you would be afraid to delete existing CSS because, well, you never know the consequences of deleting CSS. All technologies have trade-offs, and Tailwind is no different. First of all, because Tailwind is so low level, you really need to be good at CSS to have success with the framework. But I see this as an opportunity to learn CSS. And I really think that Tailwind will make you better at CSS. Personally, sometimes I just go to the Tailwind documentation to learn about some CSS features. One of the main downsides of Tailwind, in my opinion, is that it is quite verbose. You add thousands of classes to your HTML. When you are the one authoring the code, the sheer number of HTML classes is not a problem, but you may find it hard to review your colleagues' pull request. Building a reusable component that is clean, robust, and accessible is really hard. If you go the Tailwind route, you will probably struggle to create your own UI component. Building a dropdown with Tailwind is not an easy task. To mitigate this concern, maybe you can combine Tailwind CSS with a component library like Angular material or something else. In summary, Tailwind is a utility-first CSS framework that comes with a true design system out of the box. It is responsive to the core, highly customizable, extensible, and more performant. Ultimately, it provides you with a greater developer experience, but it requires you to know CSS, And the HTML is quite busy, and well, you have to build your components from scratch, which is not easy. Thank you for attending my talk, and see you soon.